The music was loud enough to drown out most thoughts, a mix of upbeat wedding songs and laughter that echoed through the glittering lawn. Fairy lights hung from every tree and canopy, their soft golden glow reflecting in the silverware and glass decorations that covered each table. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, laughing, dancing, clinking glasses, and posing for pictures. The world around her was bright, alive, and bursting with joy. And yet, at a quiet corner far from the dance floor, Alina sat alone, her hands wrapped around a glass of orange juice she hadn't even touched. She stared at the glass as if it could give her something to hold on to. The ice had already melted, tiny bubbles collecting along the rim. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, a face carefully made up for the occasion but missing something. Her lipstick was perfect, her curls pinned neatly, her dress chosen after hours of indecision. But she still felt invisible, as if the noise around her existed in another world. Alina had not even wanted to come. When the wedding invitation arrived, she'd told her cousin she was too busy, too tired, maybe even sick. But her cousin had begged, "Please, Alina, I don't want to be the only one from the family without a +1. She had said yes out of politeness, out of guilt, and maybe out of the faint hope that being around people would make her feel less alone. Now she wasn't sure what had been worse, staying home in silence, or sitting here pretending she didn't notice the way people's glances slid over her like she wasn't really there. The table beside hers was full of cousins from the groom's side, loud and friendly, swapping stories about college and work. Every now and then, one of them would glance her way and whisper something. She didn't have to hear the words. She knew that look, the one that said she looked so lost. She tried to smile whenever someone's gaze met hers, but it never lasted. Smiling felt like trying to hold a mask in place, one that didn't fit her face anymore. Her phone lay face down beside her plate. No messages, no calls. She told herself not to care, but a small, familiar ache sat in her chest, the ache of being forgotten, even when surrounded by people. The DJ shifted the music to a slower song, and couples started to fill the dance floor. Laughter and clapping followed as the bride and groom danced in the center, glowing and happy. Alina wanted to be happy for them. They were lovely together. But she couldn't stop her thoughts from drifting elsewhere. She thought of all the times she had imagined herself at a wedding, not as a guest tucked into a lonely corner, but as someone who mattered in the story. Maybe that was childish, but she couldn't help it. She sighed softly, glancing toward the exit. Maybe it was time to leave. She could slip out quietly, no one would notice. She'd call a cab, get home, change into her soft pajamas, and scroll through social media until she fell asleep. That sounded better than sitting here pretending to enjoy herself. Her cousin had promised she'd come and sit with her in just 5 minutes, but that was nearly an hour ago. Every now and then, Alina caught glimpses of her on the dance floor, spinning in her bright dress, laughing with friends, her bangles flashing under the lights. Alina didn't blame her. This was her friend's big night. But the longer she sat alone, the smaller she began to feel, like a misplaced detail in a painting too full of color. A waiter stopped by her table offering her a refill. She shook her head politely. "I'm fine, thank you." Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. The waiter nodded and walked away, and Alina watched him disappear into the crowd. She exhaled, long and slow, her fingers still circling the glass. She tried to distract herself by studying the decorations, the roses draped across the tables, the candles flickering in small glass holders, the curtain of lights behind the stage that made everything look like a dream. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter rang out. Someone shouted her cousin's name. Glasses clinked. People cheered. The world kept spinning, but she stayed still. A gust of cool night air brushed past as someone opened the gate, and she turned instinctively. Her hair swayed slightly against her cheek. She looked around again, at the crowded dance floor, at the buffet line, at the families posing for pictures, and realized with a pang that not a single person was looking for her. Her phone buzzed once, a random notification. She sighed and looked at the screen, hoping for a message. Maybe even a joke from her cousin. Nothing. She placed it back down. That was when it happened. A voice, quiet and close, spoke from just behind her shoulder, low enough that it almost got lost in the music, but firm enough to catch her completely off guard. "Pretend you're with me." She froze. For a second, she wasn't sure if she'd imagined it. Her heart gave a small, startled jump. She turned slightly, her breath catching, to see who it was. A man stood just behind her chair, tall and dressed in a crisp navy suit. His tie was slightly loosened, and there was an amused smile playing at the corner of his mouth. His eyes, dark, calm and steady, met hers with a kind of quiet confidence that made her forget how to breathe for a moment. "I'm sorry," she managed to whisper, half confused, half curious. He leaned down just enough for only her to hear. "Please," he said softly, "just pretend you're with me. I'll explain in a second." For a moment, the noise around her disappeared. The music, the laughter, even the chatter, all of it faded until there was only that strange, steady voice and the sound of her own heart beating faster than before. Her first instinct was to ask who he was, maybe even to tell him to go away. But something in his tone, calm, sincere, almost desperate but not threatening, made her pause. She blinked, unsure what was happening, unsure why her fingers suddenly felt cold. The man's gaze flicked briefly toward the crowd, then back at her. "Please," he murmured again, "just for a minute." And before she could decide what to do, Alina felt something shift, as if the lonely, silent world she had built around herself had just cracked open. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know why he'd chosen her. But for the first time that evening, someone had noticed her. And that single whisper, "Pretend you're with me," changed everything. Alina stared up at the man in the navy suit, her pulse quickening as her mind tried to make sense of what had just happened. He stood there, half smiling, half nervous, one hand still near his cufflink as though pretending to adjust it had somehow made his request seem normal. The music behind them pulsed faintly, a soft love song filling the air, and yet everything around her felt muted, like the world had slowed down just enough for this moment to stretch endlessly. He leaned a little closer so only she could hear him, his voice warm and low. "My ex just walked in," he said with a quiet urgency. "She's with someone. Please, just pretend you're with me for a bit." Alina blinked. She looked over his shoulder instinctively, but all she could see were flashes of color and movement, women in glittering saris, men laughing near the buffet, the golden shimmer of fairy lights swaying gently in the night breeze. Somewhere in that blur, maybe, was the ex he was talking about. For a heartbeat, she thought he must be joking. Who even said things like that to strangers? But his expression wasn't playful. It was real, a mixture of awkwardness and vulnerability. The kind of look that comes from being caught off guard by something you didn't expect to hurt as much as it does. She started to speak, but hesitated. His eyes met hers, soft yet pleading, and something in them made her stop questioning. He didn't look like a man trying to flirt or manipulate. He looked like someone trying to save a bit of dignity in front of someone who had once meant everything. Before she could overthink it, she nodded once, slowly. "Okay," she said quietly, his face relaxed instantly. "Thank you," he murmured, his smile widening just a little. "You just saved my night." He pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Alina, still a little stunned, tried to hide the tiny smile tugging at her lips. It was absurd, really. She had spent the entire evening wishing someone would talk to her, and now a complete stranger was asking her to pretend to be his date. They sat there in silence for a few seconds. He was tall, with slightly disheveled hair that fell across his forehead, and a calmness about him that felt oddly reassuring. The light from the fairy bulbs reflected in his eyes, brown with hints of gold when the light hit just right. He glanced toward the crowd again, his jaw tightening briefly, then relaxed and turned back to her. "Okay, quick," he said in a low, amused voice. "If she comes near, we need a story." Alina couldn't help it. She laughed. It felt strange, like her voice had been missing for hours. "A story? What kind of story?" He grinned, leaning forward conspiratorially. Something believable. How we met, how long we've been together. Basic stuff. She tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. And how did we meet, Mr. Zion? He supplied quickly, extending his hand. She hesitated, then shook it, his grip firm but warm. And you are? Alina. Alina, he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. Okay, Alina. How about we met at a coffee shop? Original, she said, teasing. He raised an eyebrow. Fine. Then you tell me, what's our epic love story? She pretended to think, tapping her chin dramatically. You spilled coffee on me, she said finally. All over my white shirt. I got angry. You apologized, and then... He laughed, a genuine deep laugh that made her cheeks warm. And then you forgave me because I offered to buy you another coffee? Exactly, she said, smiling for real now. But you never showed up again, so I left. Zion shook his head in mock disapproval. Rude, let's fix that part. I showed up, apologized again, and this time you smiled. Because I felt sorry for you, she countered quickly. He placed a hand dramatically over his heart. You wound me, fake girlfriend. The two of them laughed together, and something in Alina's chest loosened. Something that had been knotted for months, maybe years. The laughter came easily, naturally, as if she'd known him longer than a few minutes. Around them, the music shifted again, and the air felt warmer, softer. Every once in a while, he'd glance toward the other side of the lawn. Alina followed his gaze once and spotted a woman, tall, elegant, dressed in a dark emerald gown, standing with a man who looked like the kind of person who never had to try too hard to be noticed. They looked perfect together, too perfect. Alina didn't need to ask who she was. She already knew. You okay? She asked quietly, when Zayan's smile faltered for just a moment. He nodded, still smiling, but with something bittersweet in his eyes. Yeah, he said softly. Better now, actually. Alina said, giving him a playful look. Because your ex is watching? He chuckled. Because someone decided to save me from looking pathetic. She laughed again, shaking her head. I think you were doing fine on your own. Trust me, he said, lowering his voice. You don't know how awkward this night could have been. As the minutes turned into half an hour, the awkwardness between them melted away. They talked, not about love or heartbreak, but about small things. The bad food, the cheesy wedding playlist, the uncle who kept dancing like no one else existed. She found out he was a graphic designer who loved photographing sunsets, and he learned she worked with books, editing manuscripts for authors she never met but always admired. He listened when she spoke, really listened, the kind of attention that felt rare. And when he talked, his words came with ease, each sentence laced with humor that drew her in. For the first time that night, Alina wasn't thinking about how alone she felt. She wasn't wondering who was looking at her or what people whispered. She was simply there, laughing, talking, existing freely in a moment that didn't feel forced or lonely. At one point, a camera flash went off nearby, and without thinking, Zion leaned slightly closer to her, his hand brushing hers as he whispered, "Smile." She's watching again. Their hands stayed close for a second longer than necessary. Alina's heartbeat stumbled, warmth spreading up her neck. She wanted to say something witty, but her mind was a jumble of nerves and something new, a spark she hadn't felt in a long time. When the photographer moved on, she turned to him with a small smile. "You're quite good at pretending," she said. He met her eyes, and for a moment, his playful expression softened. "Maybe I'm not pretending anymore." Her breath caught, the air between them suddenly heavier. She looked away, unsure what to say. To her relief, he changed the subject, asking about her favorite books, and soon they were laughing again. But something lingered in his words, a quiet truth hidden beneath the laughter. As the night deepened, the fairy lights above them flickered softly, and the hum of conversation faded into a comfortable background. Alina found herself leaning closer without realizing it, drawn to the calm in his voice, the way his presence seemed to fill the space around her. By the time her cousin finally came over to drag her to the dance floor, Zayan stood up with her, his smile easy and real. "Well," he said, "thanks for helping me survive this night." She grinned. "You're welcome. You were surprisingly decent company for a stranger." He chuckled. "And you were far too convincing to be fake." As they parted ways for a moment, Alina realized something. She hadn't checked her phone in over an hour. Hadn't felt that dull ache of loneliness she carried everywhere. For the first time that night, she wasn't invisible. And as she glanced back toward Zayan, who was now waving playfully at his supposed ex, she realized she didn't feel like a background detail anymore. For the first time, she felt seen. The music softened into a slow, romantic melody, the kind that always signaled the night was nearing its end. The laughter around them quieted a little, replaced by murmurs and the soft rhythm of feet moving in sync. Fairy lights shimmered across the dance floor, casting golden reflections over the smiling faces of couples swaying together. The air was warm, filled with the faint scent of roses and the sweetness of the night. Alina sat back down, her cheeks still warm from laughter. She hadn't realized how much time had passed, or how easy it had become to forget herself around Zayan. The evening, which had started as a blur of loneliness, now felt strangely alive. She caught herself smiling at nothing in particular, her fingers brushing the edge of her glass again, but this time, her thoughts weren't heavy. Zayan was beside her, half turned toward the dance floor, a faint grin playing on his lips as he watched the bride and groom. "They look happy," he said quietly. "They do," Alina replied, "like they've known each other forever." He chuckled softly. "Maybe that's how it should be. Two people who just fit." His words hung in the air for a moment. Alina found herself glancing at him, studying the curve of his smile, the way the light caught in his hair, the easy calm that had drawn her in. She wondered what his story really was, the parts that went beyond the ex-girlfriend and the polite smiles. Who was he when the music stopped and the night grew quiet? As if sensing her gaze, he turned, his eyes meeting hers. "What?" he asked, smiling. "Nothing," she said quickly, looking away, but the smile that escaped gave her away. He tilted his head, amused. "You were totally staring." "I was not." "You were," he teased gently. "It's fine. You can admit it," Alina laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "And yet," he said, leaning slightly closer, "you're still sitting here." The playful spark between them felt easy, effortless, a rhythm of its own. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them more comfortable than it had any right to be. Then, as the song shifted into another slow tune, Zayan stood and held out his hand. "One dance," he said, "just to make it believable?" Alina looked up at him, caught off guard. Her first instinct was to say no. She didn't dance in public, didn't like attention, didn't like being watched. But something about the way he asked, not demanding, not pressuring, just waiting, made her pause. She hesitated, then smiled softly. "Why not?" Zayan's eyes brightened as he reached for her hand. His fingers were warm against hers, steady and reassuring. He led her gently toward the dance floor, where a few couples were already swaying under the strings of lights. The grass beneath her heels felt soft, and the night breeze brushed against her face. For a brief moment, she wondered if anyone was watching. Then she realized, for the first time, she didn't care. As the music flowed, Zayan placed one hand lightly on her waist, his other hand holding hers. Alina rested her free hand on his shoulder, her heartbeat thudding in rhythm with the song. They began to move slowly, awkward at first, then more naturally as the seconds passed. It wasn't a perfect dance. They stumbled once or twice, laughing quietly each time, but somehow it didn't matter. The world around them, the chatter, the music, the people, all faded until it felt like they were the only two under those golden lights. "See?" Zayan murmured. "Not so bad." "I'm trying not to step on your foot," she whispered back, smiling. "You're doing great," he said with a grin. "I've danced with worse." She raised an eyebrow playfully. "You're not helping," he laughed, and the sound sent a warmth through her chest. For a man who'd walked into her evening like an unexpected story, he had a way of making the world feel lighter. As the song continued, their movements fell into quiet sync, his hand guiding hers gently, her steps matching his. The laughter faded into a stillness that wasn't awkward but full of something unspoken. The closeness between them was comfortable, familiar in a way that didn't make sense. Alina looked up at him, her eyes meeting his again. There was something in his gaze now, softer, deeper, something that wasn't part of any act or pretense. "Thank you," he said suddenly, his voice low but clear. "For what?" she asked. "For being kind. For not asking too many questions. For just going along with it." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I didn't enjoy it." He laughed under his breath. "Did you?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I did." The words were simple but true. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed this. Not romance, not even attention, just connection. Someone to remind her that she could still be seen, that she could still laugh and feel something genuine. When the song drew to an end, Zion didn't immediately let go. His hand lingered in hers, their fingers still interlocked. The lights flickered above them, and for a moment, it felt like time had paused, as if the universe itself was waiting for one of them to speak. Zion looked at her then, really looked, the kind of gaze that holds stillness and meaning all at once. "Thanks for saving me tonight," he said quietly. Alina smiled. "You're welcome, though I think you saved me too." He tilted his head. "How so?" "I was just sitting there," she said honestly, "feeling invisible. You made me feel like I wasn't." Something flickered across his face, surprise, then warmth. "Funny," he said softly. "That's exactly how I felt before I saw you." She didn't know what to say. Her chest tightened slightly, her heart fluttering in that uncertain, dangerous way that only happens when something real begins. Zion exhaled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe next time. We don't have to pretend." The words hung between them, tender and full of quiet hope. Alina felt her breath catch. For a moment, she could only stare at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, at the softness of his expression. "I'd like that," she said finally. He smiled, not the charming, practiced kind of smile she'd seen earlier, but a real one, gentle and a little shy. The music faded, replaced by the hum of laughter and applause from the other side of the lawn. Someone announced that dessert was being served, and the spell of the dance slowly broke. But even as people moved past them, even as the world resumed its noise, Alina felt suspended in a strange calm, a moment she didn't want to end. As they walked back toward her table, neither said much. Words felt unnecessary. When they reached her seat, Zion paused. "I should probably say goodnight," he said, though he didn't sound like he wanted to. Alina nodded. "Yeah," he smiled faintly. "But I'd really like to see you again, Alina." Her heart fluttered once more, quietly but surely. "Then maybe you will." Zion laughed softly, stepping back. "I'll hold you to that." And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the soft glow of the wedding crowd, disappearing into a sea of faces. Alina sat down again, her thoughts still dancing even after the music had stopped. She stared at the fairy lights, feeling the same warmth in her chest that she'd felt on the dance floor. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something close. For the first time in a long while, she realized that some stories don't begin with love at first sight. They begin quietly, with a whisper in the middle of a crowded room, a stranger's smile, and the courage to say, "Why not?" And as the night drew to an end, Alina smiled to herself, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Because sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one unexpected whisper.